Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tales from Elsewhere. It's me, Peter. You probably, if you're here, you probably already know who I am. I am the creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere. And today we have a fun live stream that is going to be a kind of like a developer roundtable. I have with me Clarke, a fellow indie designer, and he's brought us a cool topic to discuss with between the two of us and with chat. And just to talk a little bit about who Clarke is. Last year, Clarke ran a really successful crowdfunded project called Wild Magic Reimagined, and it's this really robust addition to D20 based role playing games like D&D or Tales of the Valiant, where it like overhauls Wild Magic entirely. And I'm going to show its Kickstarter really quick here. Very cool stuff, super high production value, awesome guy. And so, Clarke, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the topic at hand.
Yeah, as you said, Clarke Peterson. I've been in the TTRPG space for 5 coming on 6 years now, but I definitely dived pretty quickly into the deep end into that space. And it wasn't long before like I went from behind the screen to designing to trying to publish through other people to self-publishing to here I am with one Kickstarter funded under my belt. Hopefully the first of many. Yeah, historically, I've done most of my work with the system Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, which is sort of a take on, traditional like Dungeons and Dragons fantasy, but with a couple of like tweaks that people have wanted to see throughout the years, and expanding a couple of systems. So Wild Magic Reimagined really tied into that. I felt like that was an area that they didn't quite address, probably because they ran out of pages, which is no fault to them. They used a lot of pages, but I felt that there was more to do. So that's oftentimes been a driving thing of seeing something that I really enjoy and thinking of like, how can I, like really dig my teeth into it and expand it and find all the possibilities. Which also means that, going into the future, hoping to do things beyond D20 fantasy. There's a lot of, exciting things that have been coming out, like this guy, where, the doors are just wide open, and I'm just really excited to see what the future holds there.
Yeah, definitely. And well, with such a successful Kickstarter, with such a high production value or production quality, what it does is it also proves to your customers that no matter what you make, it's, you can make something quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
you're off to a great start.
It's my debutante ball, if you will.
Yeah, yes, you're coming out right as
Fancy
the
dress,
debutante. Yeah,
bow before the queen, etc.
exactly. Yeah, so you're doing all the right things. It's great to see. Excuse me. So today, though, we're not here to talk about your crowdfunding campaign that actually
We're
already
not.
funded. We're not actually here to talk about that. We have a topic called the locus of control that Clarke, you had basically messaged me about, and we started talking about briefly. But why don't you give us a quick rundown on what this topic is you'd like to discuss and a couple definitions related to it?
Yeah, so I messaged you about this shortly after you did the video on how much control a character has over the story, and we were trying to remember the exact terms. One of them was like character as avatar, where you have very specific control over like what you could physically manipulate and your own will, versus it's like, oh, I have the ability to bring in a backstory element that I had, or sort of keep things in genre and tweak things that way. Where you're sort of a narrative force in the story, and your ability to influence the story extends beyond that. And I thought, well, there's another flip side to that. There's how far does the character extend outside of themselves, but then there's how far does the rest of the table extend into your character. And I toyed with a couple of different names for this concept. I started calling it permeability at first, but I've landed on locus of control. And I've got a tentative definition for us that the chat can tear apart. But I would say locus of control in a gaming context is the degree to which a character's actions are determined by their players' choices versus the choices of the other players or the GM.
Ah, I get you. Oh, that's real. Yeah, yeah, that's neat because there are some games that emphasize that table collaborative control, where your character is influenced significantly by the decision of others. In a recent game I played, I got to play Brindlewood Bay, and part of the gameplay of that at character creation is the other players give you items that you start with and create backstory pieces related to them. And so your own character isn't fully your own to make. It's something that the group makes. to a degree.
Yeah.
So that's an example of what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that is so there. This exists on a spectrum, and I think it would be
Yeah.
useful to give sort of the extremes of the spectrum, and in case anyone doesn't fully get what I'm talking about. So like for a strong internal locus, I think that's what a lot of people are familiar with, and what most games tend towards, where the player determines basically everything about their character, or at least what their character chooses to do. The efficacy of those actions might still be moderated by the GM, and like non-willed actions, like whether or not you trip over something, could be like prescribed with mechanical justification. But basically, like your character is yours, and other people stepping in to change things about your character or make them do things is considered like sort of a violation of that space.
I see.
Versus strong external locus, sort of the extreme end of that, is not something that you see in a lot of games. But the extreme end would be where the character doesn't belong to any one person, really. Any decision made by anybody at the table, whether that's another player or you or the GM, is equally binding on what the character would do. So we don't see a lot of games that like work with that as a full concept. There are some, but maybe a way that people might be more familiar with this is if you've ever played in a party that has a pet. Oftentimes, like control of that pet will be delegated out across the party.
I see. Yeah.
Right. So in the example that you gave just there, you're talking about there's an external locus of control, but it's a little bit on the weaker side of like the external side because it's a character creation. You are being given things that you have to take into your character, but at the same time, like it's before your character really starts making decisions.
Yeah, it's not actual gameplay elements in that way. Maybe I'm going to try to keep thinking of examples to articulate it, especially to the audience. And if anybody in chat has examples, definitely type them out. So, okay. I see Twice Dead. Hey, Twice Dead Mage. So Mothership would have a low locus of control with how much of your PC is tied to the table and the mechanics of the game. And so that's an example where, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Twice Dead, in Mothership, you can have things that take away control of your character, like becoming frightened and that sort of thing, where you hand control to the game mechanics to the GM at frequent intervals. Though that does have a lot of traditional structure to it. You do build your character, but you can do it randomly. So that's an interesting one. I haven't actually read Wanderhome, so I can't comment on how much that one is applicable.
I have read Wanderhome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where would you put Wanderhome on that?
Make a quick clarification on just terminology. The way that Twice Dead rephrased it was as low locus of control, and it's better to think of it as external versus internal locus of control.
Gotcha. I see.
So think of it as sort of like maybe a bell curve, and like at the ends we've got these extremes.
Gotcha.
Because locus of control, it just means place of control, right?
Right.
With Wanderhome, like there's definitely one of the things that you can do is sort of this token exchange system, which I really like, and was one of the things that struck me as I was thinking about like what are interesting ways to incorporate sort of more external locus of control in the game, which is kind of the bigger topic that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they do is they will say like it's been a little bit since I've read it, so I'm sure I'm going to butcher it a bit. But there's a system where you have a certain meta currency, and you can spend that currency in order to make other people take particular actions. So, for example, it might be, it's like your character is very trustworthy. You can spend a meta currency and say, like, you need to tell me the secret that you're holding on to.
Because interesting.
I've given a presence in such a way that you have to trust me on this. Right. Either that, or there might be situations where if they choose not to, there's another penalty or other mechanical effect that comes into play, or narrative effect that comes into
play. That reminds me a lot of the Good Society, which is a token exchange structure where obviously it's a very light on the actual game mechanics system. It's Jane Austen roleplay, but I would walk up, our characters, I'd walk up to Clarke at the ball, and Peter would hand you this token and say, if you accept this meta currency, we have met each other before, and your cousin, something like I posit an edit to your reality, the reality we share that affects you, in exchange for a token. So we hand back and forth some narrative control there. Even though I internally initiate that conversation with somebody else, I start it by positing something true about them, right? And so there's a handing it back and forth a bit more where you change hands, and that's a GM-less game, right? There isn't a GM to that game. So that one, I can see how there's a lot of external influence there, a lot of external
Yes.
control you're handing, and it's part of the game intentionally. That's
Right.
really cool. Yeah. I mean, in thinking about my own game design, I'm fairly trad in a lot of structures. And so when I was building my narrative influence structure in Tales from Elsewhere, it's specifically internal only, right?
Hmm.
You have a sphere outside of your avatar that you can control, and you basically never hand that even to the GM in a lot of ways. Like you control when you lose control, for lack of a better term. Like when the fear is too much and you can't act. That's your choice, and that's just I mean, it's a stylistic decision,
Hmm.
right? It's not like there's a good or bad decision there.
No, yeah, and internal locus of control. A lot of games will trend towards it, partially because it's easier to pull off, which is
That's a good
not
point.
a critique, right? Like if you're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
invest energy somewhere, it's hard to do external locus of control well. To give an
Yeah.
example of a game that just kind of like sort of sets the border on it, um, like Draw Steel is very explicit about saying like, hey, like NPCs don't make social checks, right?
Right.
Which is like implied in games like Dungeons and Dragons, but you see it fairly explicitly in some
Yeah.
other places. I think this is actually a great segue because sort of the real nuanced situation here with locus of control are any game has a certain amount of GM control
Hmm.
over other people's characters, and it's interesting like what levels of those are acceptable in different structures. Um, I think a really telling thing about this, and the example that everyone knows, Dungeons and Dragons, are the frightened and charmed conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at
Right.
the descriptions of those are internal states, right?
Yeah.
There are monsters that say you are frightened, you are charmed, you failed your save. Like,
Yeah.
there's mechanical initiation to that most of the time, but like those are the conditions. But if you actually read what the conditions say,
Hmm.
like frightened actually doesn't say that you are obliged to act in any way. It says that you can't advance closer to the source of your
Yeah,
fear,
and
and
you
you're
have disadvantage on whatever. Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Charm does say that they have like advantage on checks against you, but again, in most games, NPCs aren't making social checks
Yeah,
against.
yeah, to control your actions. They don't
Right. So
make
it has a combat effect,
yeah.
but it really doesn't. The ethos of Dungeons and Dragons and similar games is that you have an internal locus of control, and the
Mhm.
game tries really hard to protect that locus of control.
Right, exactly. And Zarian in chat saying, yeah, PC control, so we would use this term internal locus, or the locus of control is internal,
Mhm.
is generally seen as sacrosanct to most players. And yeah, it's this is my character and my story related to that
Mhm.
character, and it's my avatar, and it's definitely the most popular, we would say. But I do feel like as the years go on in the tabletop role playing game space, we're seeing more and more of external dabbling, external controlled
Yes.
dabbling, even in otherwise kind of trad games. Um,
Yeah.
it's
I
starting
sort
to
of have.
creep in, you know?
I
Yeah.
was gonna say I've got two little things to bring up on this. First of all,
Yeah.
I think brilliantly timed, like little anecdote here. Zach the Bold recently did a short video on when the GM speaks for your character,
Oh,
and
right.
yeah, and just like explain like, oh, that's not what my character would say, right? But
Yeah.
no, that he doesn't say that, right? That you don't have control over that in a game where oftentimes like the GM is the final arbiter, and in some sense, if the GM says it, you do. Like the character kind of has to plead that their character doesn't say that,
Hmm.
which gives a sense of and sort of sacrosanct space and how easy it is to do this poorly.
Yeah.
To give an example though of a game that I think does like play a little bit more into the external locus of control on occasion, I think the Mist system
Oh,
does
like
some
Legends in the
really
Mist
there.
and so
Yeah,
forth.
Legends of the Mist,
Yeah.
City of Mist, Otherscape, they're all basically under the same mechanical umbrella, with subtle differences between them. But the thing about Mist, for people who aren't familiar,
Hmm.
is that conditions in Mist are completely made up, and they affect what they
Right.
feel like they should affect
Right,
based
right.
on
They're
what the table is.
tags, really, to use
Yes.
the general design term. Yeah, and you
Right.
can make them up on the spot even if you
Yeah,
need
so
to. Yeah.
I've heard about someone having like the condition Game Boy sunken into chest 4,
I mean,
right?
I'd love to know the context of
I
that,
would
but
love to know as well.
right, that's great.
But to give an example relevant to what we're talking about here, you might say that okay, you have frightened 3, which
Hmm.
means that any roll which you make against that is not coherent with the idea that you are scared, that you are not acting scared. If any way you
Right.
try to act against that, you take a -3 penalty on, which means you are still free to put on a brave face. But that gets expressed in the mechanics, right?
Right.
Whereas if you choose to play into it, you avoid that penalty,
Right.
right? And at the same time, there's some rules built in where it's just like, you know what, my character wouldn't be scared here. Can I take a different condition that better represents how my character would act?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of the big key to doing external locus of control well, because the thing that people are scared of, I think both as designers and players and GMs, is people want to play the game. And when there's
Yeah,
an external
shocking.
locus of control, and especially if like your character is really like the only thing in this world that you do control,
Yeah.
like having that taken away from you makes it feel like someone's taking away your ability to play the game.
Right, exactly. It's we're starting to feel like puppets of the GM rather than active participants. That's one of the common criticisms, right? Is that like Twice Dead was saying, it's like why would the GM ever speak for me? Like that's so incoherent to the idea of play. And I really get that too. I'm very comfortable with high trust games as well, but at the same time I love to still remain like my words are chosen carefully. I don't want somebody to speak for me. But yeah, it's always very interesting. When we not that long ago got the chance to play a very high trust game,
We did.
in which there is a lot of, we would say, external control going on. We got to play Robbie's game. We got to play Enclave together with Robbie, another indie designer. I had a ton of fun.
Fantastic guy.
Yeah, super fun
every
time.
interaction I've had with Robbie.
Yeah, so fun. And for those that maybe didn't catch, I did a live interview with Robbie. Oh gosh, this was late last year for the Kickstarter.
All three of us had Kickstarters like running
within like a month of each other.
Overlapping with each other.
Yeah, it was great.
Not perfectly timed, but there was like a period of time.
Yeah, a little window. So Robbie's game is the very definition of super high trust, as high trust as you can be, because it has no randomizer of any kind. There are abilities and attributes and such, but they act as guidance for the GM to instantiate or canonize things into the world, right? And so all you do as the player is describe which abilities or features you attempt to use, and the GM must instantiate them. So you give up a ton of control in this system. But that's its point, right? Like that's its design goal, and it serves it well. And we had a ton of fun. But I absolutely understand how a lot of people would feel like they're not even playing the game. Like I get that, right? I totally get it, because there's too much out of their hand, right? Like
I sometimes like to describe character advancement and like as the process by which the GM cedes more and more control of the narrative to the players, right?
Right.
Like rules, in many games, like rules are what protects the players. Like so many times when a GM says like, your character's going to do this, you say actually the rules state otherwise, right? That is your defense against the GM, which would be an interesting magic class.
Yeah.
But
that's a good point. And the more powerful you become within the rule system as you progress, the more control you have over your fate.
Games are going to have different games are going to have different amounts of control that is or isn't seeded. And even Robbie's game does that. As your character advances, you add like pluses to your different attributes, and you're more likely to be able to do the things that you were hoping to do.
Yep. And you potentially gain new features too. I haven't actually looked into the progression fully, but yeah. And I'm going to catch up on chat here really quick. Let's see. So, Twice was saying, I didn't really like Wander Home as a game. It feels like an impromptu improv session, like a theater exercise. See, that's exactly kind of what we were talking about here.
Robbie was saying the same thing.
Yeah, and that's also okay, right? There are a lot of role-playing games that are light on the game side that a lot of people really like, and are more on the role play side, right? As we talk about spectrums, right? I mean, we even have an emoji in my server. Spectrums, spectrums of play. And it's not wrong to dislike either end of that spectrum, right? As long as what you're designing serves your design goals.
Mhm.
And then twice it says frightened and charmed are weird. Oh, it's mostly about movement. Yeah, in D&D, the frightened and charmed conditions are highly mechanical and are about grid-based play practically, rather
Yeah,
than...
D&D has 3 pillars, but actually one.
Yeah, it's one pillar. um, let's see here. Oh, Daggerheart's experiences are also pretty freeform, interpreted during play. Yeah, so I could honestly spend an hour probably talking about some of my things I love and hate about some of Daggerheart's decisions, because I think they're very fascinating.
I'll come back for that show.
Yeah, right. The way experiences are structured. Okay, this is the teaser of what I will talk about. We can maybe talk about another time. The Daggerheart experiences are a hope resource expenditure mechanic for a concrete bonus dressed up like role playing. That is my... Take away all the roleplay side, it is spend 1 hope to get +2 on a skill check. That's all it is. You're just loosely defining a narrative reason
When that gets to apply.
right? Like that's actually what's under the hood. And Daggerheart, and this isn't actually a criticism of it per se. Daggerheart is actually a fairly concrete mechanical traditional game with roleplay elements set on top of it to dress up the experience, ideally for more immersive play. But that's a whole, as opposed to a purely a narrative first structured game. Anyway, that might get me not in trouble, but like I might get some ire
Might
from
have
some
some
people.
respectful and invigorating discussions about
Yes,
it.
yes, I think that would be fascinating. So let's catch up here. Oh, as somebody's talking about, I don't move or speak for the PCs. I don't tell the PCs how. Yeah, like telling people how they feel, right? Like when you tell a player, this is a good example. You are afraid of this. That's a line we actually get very frequently in tabletop role-playing games, right? The frightened condition in whatever form it takes is really common. And a lot of people are comfortable with that. But a lot of players prefer to explain why they're frightened of it themselves, right? Like to internalize it their own way rather than being told what their internal monologue might be. There's a lot of nuance there.
No, and that ties in absolutely to what I was saying about people want to feel that they are still playing the game. And I think the big trick to trying to bring more external locus of control into games and doing it well is that you still give, whatever player owns the character, so to speak,
Right.
Still gets to decide how those pressures are acted upon.
Yeah.
Like to give an example, let's imagine a role-playing game for a moment, in which you're, one of the things that you can do is say, or you know what, I'll take an example. Like Avatar Legends is a great example of that, right? Avatar Legends has mechanical moments in the game where it does, you've reached a mechanical point where the game requires you to act out in some way.
Yeah.
Right? You lose your temper, you break something, you insult someone, you can decide what that's going to look like for your character, but you do need to, to lash out or remove yourself from the game in a way that is significant. I have a friend who, every once in a while, she'll say like, she'll come to you and say like, I'm really sorry I snapped at you the other day. And you'll be like, you snapped at me? It's like, yeah, I breathed out heavily and walked away.
Yeah,
like,
didn't even register.
Your version of snapping.
That happens to me all the time because I actually have very low emotional intelligence. It's all like I have low natural emotional intelligence. It's all learned behaviors. And so, yeah, like I'll apologize to somebody and they'll be like, oh, I didn't read that at all as being harsh. That's really funny. Masks also has this as well, if memory serves, where, in Masks, it's not like you get punched and take 10 damage. It's you get punched and you get angry at your absent father, right? And then there's a condition that says you're angry, and then you have to instantiate into the canon why you're angry and what that would mean, right? So you're prompted by the system, but the system, like an avatar, isn't telling you what your reality is. It's saying, hey, it's time for you to give us something about anger, right? And I like that a lot. I like prompting rather than telling when it comes to those sort of things, right?
Yes.
I like that balance of there's a game system here that we need to mechanicize because it's consequential to gameplay, but we, the table, so to speak, get to create what that moment means. I think that is a nice balance between the two.
Yeah, I think Powered by the Apocalypse games in general
Right.
have a more external locus of control than many other prominent
Hmm.
systems. I have a friend who is working on a game that's still in playtesting called Vow of the Night's Aspirant that I got to play with
Ooh,
him.
that's a cool
Um,
name.
yeah, and they actually worked on Avatar Legends.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, their name is in the credits, so they're working on Vow of the Night
Heck yeah.
Aspirant as their own game. So be on the lookout for that. But
Yeah.
one of the things in the playtest, if I recall it correctly, is um, each your character has a certain number of lessons, significant like things that they hold to be true. So, for example, the lesson that my character had was that knowledge is worth any cost, even the cost of suffering. Right?
Mm.
I can, as a mechanic in the game, impart that lesson to another character and say, which basically makes them say, you either need to accept the wisdom that I'm giving you,
Hmm.
or you need to take what's called a tarnish, which is like some sort of, emotional or moral way of rejecting it. A common one might be that we'll fall back on anger because that's a really easy one to
Yeah,
understand.
anger's easy. Yeah.
You become angry, which has its own interesting mechanical effects in the game. Like what
Yeah.
it does is if you have the anger tarnish, right, you're going to get a bonus to like checks involving like physical force or like emotional force. You actually do
Right.
better on those checks because you are um you're burning higher. You're ready to kick down that door and you have less holding you back. But you're at the risk of having like other penalties applied to you while you're in
Right.
this sort of unstable state. And then there's narrative things that you can do to remove that anger. So it really gives you
That's
like
cool.
not just the narrative choice as to, is like what is going to be the best play for me as far as, what is coherent with my story, but also the mechanical choice of like, like maybe it would be narratively coherent for me to, accept the wisdom at this point, but I'm going to hold on to my character's
Mm.
pride because I do want that anger bonus because we're about to go into this fight. And I
Yeah,
want that
that's
fight in the
neat. Let's now I want to talk to this guy too. I want to talk to this sounds really cool. I like that because it also facilitates intra party role play, intra
Yes.
party interaction, where yeah, the lesson of knowledge at any cost, for example, you're prompting another player, and the interplay between those two is a moment for those two players where the GM's just sitting back and being like,
And it was one of the
you
best
know,
moments of the session that we play tested was, at one point it's just like, you know what, it makes sense for my character to protest the thing that this other character is doing, even though I have no problem with it happening like as the player.
yeah,
But my
yeah,
character definitely does. And we got to have like a dispute and argument that like was just one of the best like dramatic moments of the
yeah,
game.
and it has in-game consequences, which is
Yes.
neat. That's actually a really great way to handle player characters that have differing ideologies without it breaking down play. Like everybody has had the game where in D&D you have the lawful good paladin who's a really big stick in the mud, or
Mhm.
the chaotic evil murderer, and like neither of them cohere with the party, and there isn't a toolbox, a tool
Yeah.
like
The only
tools
toolbox
provided.
available is sort of, the
Like
above table
yeah, above
discussion
table
between those
literal
players.
social social
Um,
aspect.
but
Yeah.
it gets really interesting to have some sort of like well grounded mechanical substantiation of resolving that conflict
Yeah.
within the narrative.
I really like that. And to before I go on to another point, I'm going to catch up really briefly on
Mhm.
chat. Swords and Stones. Oh, hey, buddy. Glad to see you in here. Let's see. Oh, Open World Addict. Also, hey. Very cool. Glad to see a couple familiar faces. Oh, okay. And Zarian and Swords and Stones are um, just chatting back and forth about control. And then SNS was saying that's a reason I did away with alignments. Yeah, I really dislike. Okay, brief aside. I liked alignments when they represented concrete um, aspects of reality in like third edition D&D,
Mhm.
like and 3.5, where like they are metaphysical powers
Yeah, when
because
it's like
it's
an ingrained part of
cosmic.
the lore.
Yeah, it's like part of reality. And I felt like that was more of a connection to be made. And it's actually why I liked in fourth edition when they added unaligned as an
Mhm.
option to balance out those choices. But I dislike the current version of alignment, which is almost an afterthought that isn't useful. And, you know, Anyway, that's a whole concept of
Is
alignment is
a
funny.
vague and oftentimes poor description of how you're expected to roleplay.
Exactly, and yeah, it's not used. It's not used very effectively. Things like what Clarke was describing in this vows game, where you have these lessons or ideologies or beliefs. All of that is way more interesting, in my opinion. And so to come back to what we were just talking about, something that I've noticed and this is going to kind of touch on the concept of neotrad a bit
Mm-hmm.
here, which is its own kind of interesting ideology. But we're seeing more and more games be about the emotional journey of the characters, um, as a mechanical structure, which this is all touching on, right? The idea of the locus of control is very much related to how a character's internal processes, for
Yes.
example, can progress. And you'll see actually in even games like D&D, in the where the gameplay experience is primarily about the emotional journey of the player characters rather than kicking down dungeon doors and killing everything you see inside for their possessions. And that's not a knock against either. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
come from 25 years ago is when I started, where gameplay was, you could still have epic stories, of course, but like, we're here to kick down doors, kill some
Yes.
blow up some skeletons with fireballs, and we do reveal a story over time, but the primary story is one of high adventure and I should say violence. um, but I watched a live, in Hollywood, even it's like a live in a theater game last year, and the crowd was super invested, really loving it. This live game, and it was almost exclusively, not entirely, but it was 80% about the emotional journey of the characters rather than the overarching plot. The overarching plot was still good,
Mm-hmm.
but we're seeing this emphasis on that emotional journey with examples like Avatar, Last Airbender, right? Or this game with what was it?
The Night Aspirant.
Vows of Night. Sorry, one more time.
Vow of the Night Aspirant.
Vow of the Night Aspirant. That's a really cool name.
Or Vow for short.
Yeah, Vow for short. Even Daggerheart is including a little bit more of that, even if I think it actually is the lightest of touches of those things. And so we're seeing players wanting the mechanics themselves to empower them in their emotional journey, right? A lot of it is an internal locus of control that has more game impact than we've seen previously, right? What it means to have this lesson I learned about the pursuit of knowledge is more consequential to the story or to the gameplay itself, than earlier RPGs really ever emphasized, where they just left that as almost an above table role play, like loose role play structure. So it's really interesting to see over time these shifts in the culture, right?
Yeah, so this ties into one of the thoughts that I had about this. And also, I got to talk to Robbie a little bit about this beforehand, kind of like the pregame of our conversation.
Yeah.
And we sort of walked away from that conversation with two big concepts. We each kind of brought one. The one I'll start with is the one I brought, which is the idea of like the contract of a game. And this is another one that I sort of like prepped a rough definition.
Yeah,
for, so
hit me with your write-up. Yeah, love it.
But I would say like the contract of a game is like the set of acceptable or expected actions in a game, like permitted explicitly or implicitly by the rules and genre of that game.
Yep.
So the big thing here it's about expectations about how the game is supposed to be played, like as informed by the text. If aliens picked up your RPG like 2,000 years in the future and managed to translate it, they would still be able to get the contract of the game across. Yep. And a lot of times the contract of the game is actually defined by like what the game doesn't say. So, for example, while, we mentioned earlier, like Draw Steel explicitly says that like, NPCs don't make social checks or checks against the PCs. Like that's kind of built into the contract of D&D, right? Because you don't see those mechanics in place. Or to give, I think what's a great example of like a more obvious point of the contract of the game, Daggerheart has an asymmetric combat system.
Right.
Implicit in that is the notion that player characters are not going to be fighting each other.
Right.
There's nothing actually in the rulebook, as far as I remember, that says that they can't. but it's implicit in the way that the game is structured that they won't.
Right. Yeah,
So in a
exactly.
similar kind of way, like games, I think, for all the audience is largely composed of TTRPG designers and aspiring TTRPG
Yeah.
designers, which are usually the same people. So knock that imposter syndrome out.
Yep.
In the same way, when you're designing your game, I think it's important to consider the contract of what you're proposing your game to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like what are the things that you're implicitly communicating will or will not be allowed at your game.
Yeah.
Is it expected that the GM can talk for your character? Not
Mm-hmm.
anywhere technically in the rules, but implicitly with the way that the rest of the game is structured, it's suggested that they shouldn't be.
Right. No, yeah, yeah. That's a really good point. And we'll expand that. I'll catch up on chat here really quick, and then we'll dig into that topic. So, oh, I see Lucian, Eden left behind in chat. But yeah, Lucian. Yeah, your video this week was really prescient on what this live stream was going to be about. Your videos have been great, by the way, dude. Really good stuff. Shows very good insight into the design process. And your one earlier this week was very much related to this. And I know we linked it in the TFE Discord earlier, but it was good stuff. Junk Knight. Oh, we're opening up the alignment can of worms. No, not really. Just we had to touch on it briefly, but y'all know alignment is such a wild conversation to actually dig into. That sounds like something I'm going to self plug here. Maybe I'll do an alignment rant this weekend on the Patreon, on the TFE Patreon or something. That's where I can do some rants. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, kind of some people talking about alignment. Yeah, never liking alignment. Yeah, so Pendragon personality traits. Yeah, Zarian, like kind of what Clarke and I were talking about, character traits, motivations, history, like those things are so much more evocative and I find more interesting than a grid of, your chaos law, good, evil, like matrix. But I'm going to come back to the idea of legacy in just a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, London, I saw you in earlier. Yeah, shared storytelling. Yep. Oh, Swords and Stone saying this is getting too... Sorry, I missed this. Like, it's getting too heady. So what Swords and Stones is bringing up, though, is that I've experienced. There is the idea of legacy expectation in tabletop role-playing games. So my regular RPG group, I am the young guy in that group. Contextualize that as you need to. I'm like the new guy to the hobby, and I've been playing for over 25 years. And so going into a group like that communicates a certain culture of play. There is so much legacy and expectation just built in. Needs no saying. Mm-hmm. It's a classic beer and pretzels night D&D group, right? We do a bit of role play, but we play the game like as the book really quite literally describes. We don't like go outside of that. We play rules as written. We check the rules like during play, and whether that's good or bad is not, the subject of this debate. But like we look up rules, and because that's this old legacy, right? That we have this particular legacy. And because of that, we almost never need to talk about the idea of what sort of contract the game is articulating. And games like D&D, every edition of it, like 5th edition on, has the legacy assumption.
Yes.
That isn't in the rules even, and isn't really communicated all that well, that you just sort of have.
Mm-hmm.
But what's been interesting to see is that you have... young guy Peter saw Evangelion when it came out. Yeah, like I said, being young is contextual. We have the graybeards like me coming into 5th edition or 2024 with our ancient ways. But then, like I was describing earlier, we have the larger audience now, because it's this huge phenomenon, that their culture of play is often articulated to them by something like, say, Critical Role, or where we have the emotional journey being presented. And because D&D itself doesn't explicitly tell you a whole lot about the type of play they expect, which is maybe intentional, leaving it open, you get these different views on the same system. Like, what is it attempting to do? right? And that's really interesting. It's like the same rule set, people view where control lies even differently because the game doesn't actually give you a lot of structure for it.
Yeah. So you and Robbie have kind of like came to the same second point. His major point was like with culture of play, which is informed by the contract of the game, but is ultimately determined by the table.
Yeah.
And different tables will have different cultures that are partly inherited, and they're partly just because when you sat down and read the rules, you walked away with different assumptions. And I think to give an example of something that might be a decent way of thinking about cultural play as distinct from contract of play. Tales from Elsewhere, like it's a survival based game, right? Your heroes are survivors. That's the notion here.
Yeah, it's even in the name of the player character. It is called a survivor, right? It's...
But it's also like it is a collaborative game insofar as like you have a team. These people are banded together for a common cause, presumably. So let me pitch a scenario for you, which I think I would say that Tales of Elsewhere's contract is silent on it, but different cultures of play would think very differently about this. Take a situation in which one of the survivors is likely to die, but if they do, everyone else gets to live.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, the other ones can try to rally and rescue them, but they won't. But they're going to be taking on significant risk to do so, and the party might all die. I think that's a thing where like the contract of Tales from Elsewhere permits both of those expressions.
Yeah.
But like different tables are going to have very different like after game like thoughts about how the game went if they're not all on the same level as to like what the expectations are. Is the expectation like, yeah, no, this is a like gritty survival game. It was a great like moment that your character's lost, and here's a new character sheet, and we'll see you next week. Versus like, hey guys, like that really was a violation of trust in my view. You could absolutely see both of those things happening at tables. And I think an important thing to mention just about culture of play while we're here is that I think when you initially say it, especially for a modern audience, like there's things that we expect from culture of play, like, oh, this is going to be a space where everybody's welcome, and we talk about things openly, and there's high communication in order to cultivate that level of trust.
Yeah.
But like it's entirely valid to have cultures of play and even like contracts that inform the cultures based on like backstabbing and deceit. Right?
Right.
Like you can absolutely imagine like, social intrigue games where the notion is like everyone at this table is out to get everyone else. Don't trust anything the other players say or do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's entirely valid. It's just about being intentional about what you're creating.
I have a really good example of a unique, completely explicitly articulated version of this, and that's Peasantry, which I'm a big fan of. That's a Zachary, an indie TTRPG developer. It's not fully out yet, but go to peasantryttrpg.com. There's a free playtest pack. It's a riot. So it is a game in which every player is a filthy peasant. You do not have an option to not be a filthy peasant. Everyone's character is randomly generated. It is designed only for one-shots, by the way. And there is a winner at the end of the session. The filthiest peasant is the winner of you win. And there's literally a box where you write in your dirt points. And they're basically like hidden achievements in the adventure for nonsense, like utter nonsense. And so at the end, somebody is the filthiest peasant and they won. And so you can win and die. Like I have not survived a session of this game. And I have won, I think, 2 out of 3 of them. And it's hilarious, right? Because sometimes when you've built into the game a very particular, not only a culture that it's trying to articulate, but there's a contract that it says at the very start. We're all filthy peasants. It's going to be nonsense. You'll probably die. And that's the point, right? It's from top to bottom. It is a silly, humorous, one-shot specific game. And it's the most I've ever laughed playing role-playing games. I've never laughed so much making a character as I have in this game, because it's all these huge random D% tables of utter nonsense. You have all these quirks and fears and it's just absurd. You could be a rat catcher and your feature is, I had part of my backstory that I was divorced and it gave me the skill regret. That's all it said. And so it's full of things like that. And so you go down to sit at a table with this And you expect the other peasants to maybe stab you in the back because we're all filthy, rotten peasants. And that's okay. But it does so explicitly. Like it says so at the start.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a video a little while ago on this subject where, oh, and I see some peasantry. Yeah, Tim has gotten to play it a number of times as well in chat. I do think role-playing games at the start of a book, when you're going to dive into what this game is about, it's helpful to give a pitch as to what is the GM like, what are the players like, and how should you interpret the game, right? I think that's really helpful, and it's why I have the rule of cruel at the start of my game, right? It's a meta guidance like, hey, everybody should buy into this concept here in the hopes of steering. You're nudging how people might play, but it's not like it controls it.
Yes.
I don't have, where's my fifth? I don't have the 2024 PHB in front of me right now, but the new 2024 PHB for D&D has written at the start that, I'm going to paraphrase, the DM is there to like delight the players with a story of adventure, right? Like it's using very uplifting terminology. Like this is the story of the players' heroic deeds that they should all be smiling about by the end of the session, right? And that's very different from, just because I happen to have books, like Shadow Dark is not a game in which the purpose of the GM is to delight the players with a story of their heroism. It's not a design goal.
That would violate the contract of the game.
Yeah, that violates the contract of this game. Just right. You build those kinds of ideologies explicitly, and when you're making games like with OSR, there's a lot of assumed ideology, right, with OSR games because of that legacy. But I think if you're not making a game that exists within an existing ideology, like you're not making a 5e supplement or you're not making an OSR game, it's really helpful to articulate.
You have the ability to set the tone.
Yeah, you can articulate that, and should, I think, just a few lines even in your, either in the GM guidance section or at the start of the book. I'm just going to cite an example really quick, just because I have
else than for your Facebook ads.
Yeah, exactly. So like just a brief, because I have my beta next to me. The way that I describe the GM is just to pull, because this articulates the concept of what this game is about. A good horror movie is scary and sometimes even shocking, but it's also entertaining and exciting. Right? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's like, this is what this game is. It's like a horror movie. And for people that like horror movies, that's fun. So you got to buy into, like, it's attempting to say, like, this is what this game is kind of about. It's going to be violent. Horror movies are violent, right? In general. So I do think it's... Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're intentional and explicit about communicating your contract and hopefully nudging the culture of play, you don't have to worry so much about saying, there's times when you're wondering, it's like, okay, like if I include this mechanic in the game, like how are different people going to react to that? And it gives you a little bit of freedom there because, it's like, oh, the people that I want to play this game and who are going to react to this the way that I want them to are self-selecting into the game. And the people who don't are self-selecting out.
Right, so exactly. They won't buy in.
You have more like influence over the culture, just insofar as presenting something that's attractive to the kind of people who will enjoy playing the game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And especially when you're making very niche games, like I'm making a very niche game, right? Which I'm a niche guy. It does self-select already quite a bit. Somebody who picks up a Weird West horror, game has already narrowed to probably in the same ballpark as what I'm going for. Right? I've had a lot of people that haven't played Weird West or horror games before play the game now and find it quite fun. But articulating genre and that expectation, even with artwork, for example, right, goes a long way. There's this expectation. I know I'm going a little off the rails here. Let me find an example. This is what an OSR game looks like. I'm holding up Shadow Dark. This is OSR, right? If you make a game that looks like this, people will think it is OSR because this is now an established visual language.
Yeah, it's a convention.
Yep, it's a convention. And like I had somebody once say they really actually liked my sketch, the sketches of some of my monsters better than the high res. but I don't want my game to look like an OSR game, right? That's not the goal there. And when you deviate from it, like Vagabond used bright colors because it's going for pulp fantasy. Let me just flip to a page here that has, like, there's a lot of bright colors, right? You know, you're all of this goes into helping articulate the point you're making, Clarke, right? It all goes into that. When you deviate, you're communicating some of that expectation. I realize I've been ranting for a while. Let me catch up on some chat. Let's see. Shocking that Peter, the guy who records videos of him ranting for 20 minutes at a time, starts ranting. I feel like alignment works best for monsters that are inherently unlikely to change their perspective. This is a really interesting conversation about morality and monsters and behavior that I do not think we have time to go into. I have a lot of thoughts about that. That comes down to like what is a person and personhood and defining that and how it relates to the articulated morality of your game. That's a very heavy subject. We'll have to come back to that another time. Swords and Stones. My basic contract is be nice, play well, have fun with the group. Basically, don't be a dick. Yeah. Like that's kind of like what it is at my local D&D group too. Like that's all we want. After a long week of work, we just want to like crack open some beers, eat some pizza, and fireball some goblins. You know, let's just have fun. We're not here to rustle any jimmies or you know, we're all here to be nice to each other and just have a good time because it's our escape.
At the same time,
yeah,
I will push back on that just a little bit. I come from a family that enjoys arguing as a pastime.
Yeah.
Like my brother and I, you know, if we get together for a long enough family vacation, we will start fighting over something dumb, right? And you know, like our wives, you know, both chose us, and so they understand what's going on.
They know what they got into.
They claim from a different like cultural expectation.
Yes.
And like I've been around people who like when I start to have like, you know, one of these like fun kinds of argument with my brother, we'll try to start to diffuse it because they interpret it as a conflict that's not fun for them.
Gotcha.
And so I think that, you know, like play nice, don't be a dick is great, but like people are going to have different expectations around what that means. And so it is worth trying to be a little bit more explicit about what those kinds of conventions are for your game. And like if your game is really broad, those conventions might be really broad, but one thing that can be really useful is, you know, even just giving like safety tools like, hey, I'm not here to set the tone for what your game's going to be. I allow a lot of different things, but here are some things you might want to talk about before you go into it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh, and Junk Knight, just like shortly thereafter, makes the point about, you know, it's defined in session 0, right? And to kind of lend credence to what you were just saying, Clarke, back when I joined this D&D group I answered an ad on the Wizards of the Coast forums looking for players, of all things, way back in the day, just for a local group. The term Session 0 didn't even exist yet. But what the host and DM at the time did, though, is he basically interviewed everybody first, like a Session 0, right? To talk through, you know, hey, are you a psycho? And I don't want you in my home. And are you chill?
Or are you a psycho and I do want you in my home?
Yeah. Like, do you meet the vibe, right? The vibe that we're going for. And we've set the concept of a Session 0 has gained a lot more structure and tools to help facilitate it now. But at the end of the day, it is like, yeah, a conversation about expectation. And the more thorough that conversation is, the more likely you are to have a more fun at the table, honestly, because everybody's on the same page. So yeah, it's a good point, Junk Knight. Yeah, a Session 0 handles a lot of that. Whatever form your Session 0 takes, whether that's like meeting up for drinks and chatting about it, or literally sitting down with lines and veils worksheets if you need to. Like whatever form that is for your group, just have the conversation, right? That's the most important thing. Let's see. In my test, we did both of those solutions for the player lost. TFE does really both. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you had fun, London, playing TFE, by the way. It was absolute blast running that game. Let's see. Boy, chat really went quick here while I was ranting. Peasantry is so good. We have... I wonder if there's a rule book that contains a QR code leading to an example. Yes, I have seen. I haven't seen one with a QR code to my memory, but I've seen hyperlinks provided in PDFs or referenced websites referenced in books that go to actual plays. I have seen that. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but those do exist. That's why I don't plan on putting like a QR code in my rule book, but my website, my YouTube channel does have like tutorials on it, and I'm planning
A
on
whole other
expanding that.
conversation that's way worth having at some point would be like the way that the media landscape is changing, such that print materials now expect like digital interface.
Right. It's
Like the
it's
biggest
wild.
thing is like I open up the Draw Steel book and it's like, oh, there's a link there. This is my
Yeah.
physical copy.
Yeah,
I
isn't that
can't
weird?
actually click that link, and there's no page reference.
Yeah, yeah, and it's will that work 20 years from now? Right? I
Mhm.
still have my first copy of 3rd edition D&D from the year 2000, and that thing is starting to fall apart. Anyway, um word layout selling to a certain audience is art and setting is a shorthand for the designer's idea of play. Yeah, so Twice did saying, yeah, art and setting communicate so much, or can, I should say, communicate so much, like we were saying. Arguing to pass time, play D&D 3.5. Yeah, I remember those days. Twice, is Clarke Jewish? Because Jewish community, they love arguing as a pastime. Debate is very much integral to the Jewish community. It is very true. We won't talk about what people's ethnic or religious backgrounds are here on live, but that's fine. I know Twice Dead, you're knowledgeable about Jewish history and Jewish community.
I would give Tolkien's answer is that I regret not to have any ancestors in that estimable place.
Right. So let's see. Session zeros as a group vibe check is really accurate. Yeah, session zero is a group vibe check. That's really what it comes down to. I've experienced both ends of that spectrum. When I was running an internal campaign of Tales from Elsewhere, one player filled out a Lines and Veils worksheet for me and provided it to me because they had very specific things that they didn't want to experience, and they didn't ingest horror media regularly, and so they weren't sure what to expect. And turns out the list she gave me was perfectly in alignment with the stuff I have no interest in doing in horror either. It was like violence against children. I'm like, I don't want that in my game either. Like, no, sexual violence or something. Like, absolutely not. So she filled it out. It was really great. And it turned out we were absolutely in alignment anyway. The way she ended up communicating it was different than how I would have done it. Like, you go out for drinks, you just talk through the kind of stuff we will and won't do. But in the end, it really can help to just vibe check it, because then she played the game and had a blast, even though she doesn't ingest gnarly horror regularly. She had so much fun because she knew didn't have to be anxious about what could happen and it really being upsetting to her, right? I think it helps for horror so much.
Mhm.
I've been doing session zero since the 90s. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't remember when the term session zero came around, but yeah, the idea of the pre-game vibe check, or like hang out, let's talk about the new campaign and what characters we're going to play, it goes back to the beginning of the hobby, really. Actually, a good question. Hardcover demand versus PDF demand. I feel like TTRPGs all go way too deep into digital form nowadays. Well, that's an interesting discussion. This is where we're starting to divert away from the original topic, but this is an interesting discussion that I'd like to get Clarke's input on, because I am an analog gamer. That's where my heart lies. I like physical books, sitting at a table with my friends. But I get to play tabletop role-playing games with people all over the world right now because of digital tools. And that's super cool, right? Like, I played in a session where there was somebody, I think, in Germany, somebody was in France, Croatia, and I forget and like Scotland or something, like all four in the same game, and then me in the United States. Like, all five of us got to play together because of digital tools, and that's awesome. I prefer when a game functions at its fullest in an analog manner, but I'm provided tools that could facilitate a smooth type of play online. That's where I like, where it's low stress if I wanted to play it online, simply because I do so fairly frequently these days. But what I want to like kick over to Clarke really quick is that, so Clarke's campaign, and I'm going to switch our view really quick to show it. So part of Clarke's campaign for Wild Magic Reimagined, this isn't just like a plug of it, I just think it's a good example.
No, I was going to bring it up if you didn't. So
Oh,
we're
perfect.
both going in the same direction.
So, and I've got here, there's this cool GIF. There's cards for Wild Magic Reimagined, and there's something so cool about like drawing from a deck of cards for like Wild Magic. And so you want to talk a little bit about building for these analog, like building
Yeah, I mean,
analog
like,
components and all that.
so here's kind of the thing. There's a world in which I made Wild Magic Reimagined on a super low budget, and I just released it as a PDF, right? The thing that really made me say this needs to go to Kickstarter is I was looking at all the things that having physical cards bring to the table, like aside from table presence, which is its own selling point. Like,
Yeah.
you can draw without replacement, right? You can make sure that, like, if you draw a Wild Magic effect, it goes to the bottom of the deck and it won't come up again until you've done all the other ones.
The deck remembers, as it were.
Yeah, which is really important for like maximizing the sense of randomness. And I was looking at like what would it cost to do print on demand for this, and it was just prohibitively expensive for like what I think most people would be willing to pay. And I was like, okay, like I need to do mass production so I can make that available, and that means I need to go to Kickstarter. So like in large part, the Kickstarter was informed by that choice. And there's other things that my book needs to do a little bit above and beyond what others need to do because of like the physical presence, and also because of like its commitment to cross compatibility. My game's cross compatible with D&D 2014, 2024, Tales of Valiant, and Level Up. Those books are mostly in agreement with each other, but not completely. And so, one of the things that's important to me is that no matter what game system someone's coming to the book from or wants to play with, they have equal access. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm debating whether or not I'm going to do it for like all of the like spells that monsters reference in like their own casting. But like at the very least, for everything that is referenced in the Wild Magic tables, if there's a spell or a monster reference, we're reproducing the stat block or spell in the book. So you can play when the power's out and you'll have access to all of the resources you need. And there's like a handful of spells that I want to draw from like one system where like the exact parallel doesn't exist in the other one, or it's not clear what the parallel would be. Like just to give off the top of my head, there's a spell in Level Up called Searing Equation, which I think fits super well in certain spots. It doesn't exist in Tales of Valiant or in D&D. And like, I want to make sure that people have those tools available to them to play, even if they don't have access to the ability to go and look up what that spell is. You can find it for free on the internet. Level Up is really good about posting the rules for free, but analog play is important to me. Another thing that came up just a couple weeks ago was I was working with one of the designers that I'm hiring on one of the monsters that we were working on. And it's a high CR monster. And we were wanting to incorporate like a lot of different kinds of Wild Magic effects. And one of the things that I had to sort of push back on a little bit was, they had some really interesting things that they want to do with kind of like complicated interactions with the cards. And I was like, this monster will take like 20 minutes to set up, and like every turn will take 5 minutes to keep track of which deck you're pulling from. And their response was like, well, that's really easy in a VTT. And I'm like, but we want to make sure that people can play this even if they don't have a computer managing that hassle for them. So we had to like trim some of that back and think about, what's the costs that we're willing to accept for physical play versus the level of complexity and interesting mechanical things that we can do if we allow ourselves to like have more variation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
so this has been all this to say, it's been a big point for me, like digital versus physical play.
Exactly. And this is just sort of to Junk Knight. I think there is still a big commitment, just to go back to your comment, a big commitment to analog play in the community. But at the same time, for indie designers, it is a mistake to not provide some amount of digital access, right? Simply because the reality is there are a lot of people all over the world who don't have the ability to play in person with others easily because they don't have communities nearby of sufficient size to facilitate that. It can be hard. So digital access, even something as simple as like making some VTT tokens from your monster art in your book, right? Little things. All of that goes a long way to enabling people to play your game who can't do so in person easily. And I've talked to tons of people like that so I live in one of the most densely populated nerd centers of the world. And so like I'm tripping over game stores right? If I ever want to go play an RPG. But there's people that, unless they're going to play with their immediate family, have no sizable community. So they must play online realistically. So that's something to consider as indie designers. You want to remove barriers for people to play your game. That doesn't mean you need to make a video game, right? You don't need to go hard in the other direction necessarily, but just consider that. Oh, and Copper was asking, is this a Kickstarter review? No, we're on here talking more about something more philosophical, but the conversation steered toward physical media versus digital media. And Clarke had a very successful Kickstarter last year that is a good example of talking through physical media and so forth. So that's what we kind of popped up here. But we'll go back to just the normal view. Swords and Stones had to head out. So let's take a look here. And Swords and Stones was saying, a lot of their friends have moved away, and so they need to play digitally more frequently. That's exactly what we're talking about. I exclusively play online from the TFE Discord. Yeah, that's pretty much the same for me, Lucian, is that my online games are through with my community, and I don't play anything else online. I just play in person. Occasionally I play with other YouTubers. I like when the rules are available online for quick reference. Yeah, a like handy online SRD can be really helpful. That kind of thing is great. I've had one online game.
My Kickstarter was twice as successful as it was. I would have tried to do like a mobile app version of the cards.
Oh, that'd be sick. That'd be super sick.
That's way more than I'm prepared to handle right now.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. A whole thing. And Zarian saying they just got it. Yeah, so there's so many actual plays out there right now, and a lot of these actual plays vary from recorded in-person sessions to fully digital experiences. You'll see, it'll run the gamut. I know I say it frequently, but like I can't watch it. I just can't seem to watch actual plays. I try. I don't know what it is. I can watch like super edited down 20 minutes maybe, but I can't watch live. I couldn't watch myself run a game live. I just but anyway, so let's kind of coming back.
Yeah, to bring it back, we got on this. We got a little bit out, but at one point we were talking about culture and contract of play as a tie-in to the question of like external locus of control.
Yes.
And the notion that like board games that require that additional level of trust, where people are going to be coming into your character and sort of making some degree of decisions for them, it's more important to communicate what the expectations are, both like within the text of the game, as well as encouraging people to have those conversations if you're a designer, or to initiate those conversations if you're working as a player or GM.
Definitely. And what I really want to strongly recommend to every indie designer here, whether you're just a hobbyist or not, we tend to design games the way that we feel like is the most fun for us, right? That's what we do, right? We want to make the game that we're used to sometimes, like that has the normal mode of play. Or what we consider the normal mode of play. I highly recommend you try playing games that are wildly different from that, though. It's a really good problem. Not read. It's good to read them too. But if you're making a highly tactical trad, combat simulator game,
go play Good Society.
Go play Good Society, or Dread, or 13 Candles.
Crash Pandas.
Yeah, just like any of these wildly different games, or like we were talking about earlier, Enclave. Play something way outside your comfort zone and buy into it for that session. Right? You don't have to change your whole ideology here and think this is the best way to play, but like really buy into it and try to find the value that those players extract from the game, and it will help refine your own design processes. Similarly, if you're making something very light and narrative focused, it's good to actually roll up your sleeves and like play a Pathfinder 2e session or something, right? Like get your crunch on.
At the very least, like from the cynical perspective, you'll then be justified in why you don't like it, and be able to like explicitly say, this is why I'm going in a different direction.
Absolutely. It's like for example, I played Enclave recently. Loved that session. I had so much fun. But it also reinforced my own preferences, which are different from that. But I'm like, for when I make my own game, like I'll play on, I want to play Enclave again. Like that same group, please. Like when I have time, you, me, Robbie, and Oh,
Mary?
Mary, yeah, like super fun, absolutely. And it's okay to enjoy that and still make a game that is wildly different from it. But I
Mhm.
felt like it helped me understand my own thinking better simply from
Mhm.
playing it.
Yeah, and I think one thing to back up your point that I got from our game of Enclave that maybe wouldn't have been immediately apparent from the rules is my experience with it was that I felt that our characters were succeeding at most of the things that we attempted in a way that we wouldn't have in a dice-based RPG.
Right, yeah, we it is a succeed forward. You generally succeed in that game because you
So long as your
know,
success is compelling, then
yeah,
you generally succeed.
yeah, and challenge and conflict came at times from intra-party conflict, which was super fun. Because I love intra-party conflict like that. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so London, as a neotrad, nobody is a wannabe designer, by the way. London, like Clarke said earlier, if you are designing a game, you are a game designer. I don't foresee how much I would learn from PBTA games. So I'm gonna. I think I've said this
That's
before.
yeah, that's why you play them because you don't foresee it.
Yeah, I don't like PBTA games like as a rule. Like I do not, I I don't enjoy that structure inherently. I can have fun playing a PBTA game, like Brindlewood Bay, absolute
Mhm.
lovely time. But I'll never design one. But after playing it, it reinforces as what those things are about PBTA games that I don't enjoy, and then to make sure that I'm not actually accidentally making similar mistakes in my own game, right? Or not mistakes, but because it's not a mistake the way a PBTA
Yeah.
game is designed. So it's not to say like go regularly get in on Apocalypse World or something, but I find it very communicative and revelatory when I experience games with different locus of control, like super external locus of control. It really helps show me those possibilities, and then maybe I don't change anything, but I feel more concrete or more
Or
confident in the design.
the positive thing is like oftentimes those games, even if it's not their core idea, like have little ideas that you might be able to steal. Like I was reading through Wanderhome when I was like working on a design project for something that I didn't end up releasing it.
Mm-hmm.
um but I was, I got to the point where then we're talking about how magic works in Wanderhome, and I was like, oh, like that's like exactly the kind of thing that I needed for the design problem that I was trying to solve. Like I'm not making
Yeah,
Wanderhome, but like there was, a level of exchange where I'm like, that's what I need.
yeah, absolutely. Or like for my game, my luck system is very much from like the PBTA side of the world, though. Like, not necessarily PBTA with the moves,
Mm-hmm.
but my luck system is very much from the narrative side of gaming, even though I'm mostly like making a combat based game. And I learned those lessons by dabbling in the other side of the spectrum. And I found a way to incorporate that inside of my game that really enhanced it. Right. It's so much so that there's a lot of people whose their favorite part of my system is that luck system, you know, which I wouldn't have had the insight to include if I hadn't dabbled in narrative exchange, meta currency based like control in that way. So it's really helpful. Challenging to find a group sometimes. Let me catch up here on. I missed what you were showing. Oh, earlier we were just showing Wild Magic Reimagined, Clarke's Kickstarter from last year. I'll just post a quick link to it in the chat here for anybody that missed it. I think I
That'd
have
be
it in
nice.
the description, but that's what we were showing earlier, just as an example of card production, physical media. It would be interesting to see TFE adapted as a PBTA game. That's interesting. So the vibe of my game you could do with PBTA, like the setting of Clockworld and Weird West, but
There's so much of your game that's like the mechanics are like
yeah,
core to its soul.
exactly.
There's an Italian phrase which I can't replicate, but that's kind of to the point. And the phrase is like the translator's a traitor.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's catchier in Italian, which proves the point of the phrase.
Yeah, yeah,
Where it's like, yeah, you can, I've been thinking about like cross compatibility a lot, and a lot of times it's the case of like, don't actually try to translate all of the mechanics because it won't work, right?
right.
Translate like the soul,
Hmm.
but also know that like there are things that are like the mechanics are there, they're the body that the soul inhabits.
Yeah,
and you get a living organism from the combination of the two.
Right.
The classic thing of like D&D works terribly for horror because like the mechanics aren't built to support that genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what PBTA games do, kind of generally speaking, is they zoom out, is how I would describe it. A move in a PBTA game, like ideologically, covers a lot of ground on what's happening. It's this is getting a little philosophical at PBTA.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. So like, you have a PBTA like overcome the trauma is a move, or fight all out is the move. These are encapsulating the description you're giving. So in PBTA, you describe what you're doing and then you match a move to it, is kind of what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, that sounds like you're going all out to fight like there's no tomorrow, and that's the move you trigger. A big ideology of my game is you zoom in a lot, though. Like, we describe the exact dagger.
Did you stab the arm? Did you stab the body? Did you stab the left arm? That's different.
Exactly. Let's zoom in and get all the gory details of the micro moment, because Peter philosophically thinks that's where horror resides, is in small zoomed in moments. When the player, and so much of the mechanics facilitate zooming in like that. It's why you can play, I consider it a victory of the system. You can play a whole 3 to 4 hour session that is just the players like trying to help a wagon train cross a river. It could be a whole session, and it's full of zoomed in moments. And it takes the whole session to resolve it, but it is not dull for a moment, because that wagon tipped over and crushed the doctor you're traveling with, and now he's pinned underwater and drowning. That's a problem you need to solve. Like, every little detail gets zoomed in. Anyway, so it's a little ideologically incoherent with how PBTA attempts to conceptualize game mechanics.
Yeah, that's like to take like the total flip side of that. Somewhere on my bucket list for like 20 years down the line of nuts I want to crack in TTRPG design is I would love to marry it to one of my first nerd loves, which is the Civilization franchise.
Oh.
Like, I would love to somehow bring the fantasy of like guiding an empire through the ages, like, to a role-playing game table. But that needs to work completely differently because everything is so abstracted.
Yeah, that's be super fun, honestly. As somebody who used to play a lot of Civ 2, I think, I'm trying to remember which Civ I was into. I'm old. But yeah, that really zoomed out play, or it's often referred to as domain play, is the other term I've heard. I think there's a lot of empty space there for people to fill. The people have not filled in TTRPGs yet that I'm excited to see. So
it would require, I think, some really significant like changes to just our baseline assumptions about how TTRPGs work, which is probably why nobody has done it. But hopefully this is the first domino trickling down that chain.
Yeah.
And,
well, heck, if you ever get something,
I would be happy to lose that race.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? For one of the upcoming TFE books, I'm lightly exploring minor amounts of domain play. But ideologically, since TFE is about zooming in, anything that is zoomed out must be very rules light. Because that's how it needs to be. It needs to be quick, a couple die rolls, and it moves on. Anyway. But I would love to see something really robust built into that, right? I gotta catch myself. I keep accidentally trying to say things that I'm not supposed to reveal yet about my future projects. Twice it says, let's zoom the fuck in, TFE. Yeah, pretty much. Mega games are sort of this. I haven't played any mega games. I thought Microscope does a Civilization style game. Oh, I am not familiar with Microscope doing a Civ style game. I have to look into that.
Add that to the list.
Yeah, add it to the list. Too many games, not enough time.
Good problem to have.
Yeah, well, I'm at the point where I'm not reading a lot of new tabletop role-playing games. If I have time to read games, I'm trying to read indie designer games, right? Like, that's, I think, a more useful use of my time these days. The little time I have to read, not literature, basically. Zoom and enhance, yeah, for TFE. Yeah, pretty much. And I hope that has been, for those who are in the chat who have played or run games, I hope you've experienced that. You're very zoomed in. But we've, like I said, we've gone off the rails, and which is totally okay. And like Clarke, we were saying before we even started live streaming, you and I could fill several hours probably just like philosophically exploring a number of.
We've done that in private already.
Exactly. Don't rub your eyes, Peter. That ain't good. Oh, so yeah, I know. I'm as some of you may know, I suffer from lifelong insomnia, and I did not get much sleep last night. So we got sleepy eyes today. Thank you, Twisted, for reminding me I shouldn't be touching my face, especially my eyes. So we're going to wrap up here for the most part, because I think we've covered very robustly the concept of locus of control.
And a couple other things.
So to kind of do a little recap here for those that came in late, so this is a little over an hour in content. We're talking about the idea of locus of control, where the control resides for gameplay elements. Like, is it entirely internal? A game like D&D is an internal locus of control because everything that your avatar, your character does in game is controlled just by you. And not only that, but their ability to influence the world is purely through their avatar. While some games that usually go more in the narrativist direction start having external locus of control.
Or it becomes more collaborative. Where the table or the GM starts to have more control over the reality your character is experiencing and the things they get to do. If they don't control it, they might have the ability to force you to make a decision or act within a more constrained set of choices.
Exactly. Like the great example Clarke brought up was Avatar, where you have you're out of balance. I forget the exact term. You become out of balance.
You lose your balance.
You gotta be angry now or something. Tell us what that looks like. And here's the mechanical consequence, but now we dress it up with narrative. Right? You're being prompted by the system. That is a really good example of doing it. And as always, these are spectrums, right? From purely internal to purely external and everything in between. And game systems as a whole are rarely unified entirely, right?
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You'll have elements of a game system that move control around in various places. So it's worth exploring that idea because a lot of games, the game designers, we have an assumption of how the game is going to be played and how control is going to be, but your rule system itself either needs to very effectively have that implicitly in them, or have some sort of or have an explicit caveat or guidance at the start of the rulebook to make sure people understand the intended way to play. So that's kind of
especially for external control, because people get very protective of what they feel is their ability to play the game, and it can be perceived as an infringement, but at its best it can be like a really exciting opportunity. And I have enjoyed games that do external locus of control well, better I think than most games that stick with purely internal locus.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with you. And just to wrap up with a couple comments here, a lot of people saying they really enjoyed this sort of less mechanical and more philosophical type of stream, and I'm glad to see that. You know me, I like all top to bottom, all aspects of game design. And the plan
it'll be statistical tables of dice.
Yeah. And the plan for this year, for 2026, is to try to have on more indie designers and to have these conversations to explore these subjects. So definitely, I usually don't say this enough. Hit like and or subscribe on the video, because the better these videos do, the more easy it is for me to justify carving out more time out of my weekends and such to do them. They're a lot of fun, but there is a time investment. We'll definitely be doing more of these, and Clarke, we'll have to have you back on because
I'd love to be back.
Yeah, it's just fun to talk to you in general. Like, I mean, we've talked outside of stream too, because there's a number of subjects that I think would be worth expanding on and digging into. And I really liked a while ago when I had Clock Chaos and Dr. Ben. I'd love to do another 3-person roundtable. I think would also be a lot of fun. So it'll be very good stuff. Well, anyway, all right. Thank you all so much for coming into chat and asking questions and participating. If any of you, I recognize most of the people in the chat. If you want to continue these sort of conversations, head to the Tales from Elsewhere Discord server. I don't know if anybody wants to keep chatting about it in one of our design forums, but we have these kind of conversations all the time, and definitely check it out. And Clarke, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on here.
Anytime.
Yeah, super fun, and we'll have you back on another time. All right, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend.
So long.
And it's still ending.